Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
Today's guest is a professional musician, producer, and composer. My guest's musical journey began in the 1990s when he joined a band. The band needed a keyboard player. He had a keyboard, so he took the chance, and the rest, they say, is history. Since taking that opportunity, my guest has gone on to work with several household names in the music business. Motown legend Smokey Robinson, the popular 1980s group Bananarama, Enrique Iglesias, Ellie and Nicole Scherzinger. He even worked as a musical director on events for Sir Richard Branson in 16 countries. My guest has spent over 25 years working, performing and touring with Gary Numan. He's also released a solo album under the name Little Finger. The album is called Big Finish and features collaborations with musicians who have performed with Gary Numan, Stereo MCs, and Ronan Keating. On today's Your Take, I'm joined by David Brooks. David shares his musical journey. He discusses roots, his influences, joining a band in the 90s, musical collaborations, and his relationship working with an electronic pop legend. Good evening, David.
Hi.
A very warm welcome. I'm good. Yeah, thanks for joining me this evening on Your Take.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of things to discuss, obviously, in the next 60 plus minutes. You break into music, your love affair with music from an early age, collaborations and life on the road. Can we go back to the very beginnings? I wanted to start by asking when and where you were born, and to give us an insight into your childhood. Tell us who your parents are, what they did for a living, and do you have any siblings?
I was born in Doncaster, in Yorkshire. My dad was the vicar of a parish just outside Doncaster, and my mum was a music teacher. They're from that area, and I spent a bit of time there. I've got a sister, Carol, who's a little bit older than me, and my dad, as I say, was a vicar, but he went into the prison service as a chaplain, as a prison chaplain, and they moved him quite frequently every few years. So although I was born in Doncaster, we ended up zigzagging around all over the country. Lived in a few places. Yeah.
A portrait on your parents, and interestingly, already picking up on a musical connection that we'll come on to in just a minute. I wanted to move on to your early education and ask you where you went to school and what your memories from your time there. Which subjects did you particularly excel in, and did you go on to further education?
So we moved around a bit, went to quite a few different schools. I got quite good at being the new boy, at school, which I think was a good thing for me. I think I'm quite a take anywhere kind of person from having to be the new boy at school. You kind of learn to be able to empathize and socialize with people. And we ended up back in Yorkshire, actually, for my sort of O-level time, at Wakefield was where we settled. My dad was at the prison in Wakefield. There's a big prison there. And so I did my teens right through there. And I did music, but my mum wouldn't let me do O-level as it was then. She said, there's no point. I think she knew I wasn't going to be, a classical musician or a pianist or whatever. so probably not much point. So she warned me off that, and I did English and all the mainstreamy stuff really. Did my A-levels, started on the A-levels, but then I'd started playing. There was instruments around the house. There was a piano and a guitar and whatnot. And I'd got into music around that 16, 17, I guess, maybe a bit younger. Started playing in bands. So by the time I was supposed to be doing my A-levels, which were all very mainstream, I was out playing. And I ended up leaving at the end of the first year, the sixth form, and going to a performing arts college in Wakefield, which was very sort of Fame. It was, there was the program Fame on the telly at the time, and it was dancers and drama and music and whatnot. And I met TJ, a girl called TJ Davis, who she was there as a singer, and we eventually ended up moving to London, and she was the backing singer for Gary Numan before I got the job. So that's jumping ahead. That's my in with Gary. But yeah, so went on to music college, and then went on to Leeds College of Music. I don't know what the hell I thought I was going to do with that, teaching or whatever. But I didn't stick it out till the end. I got a gig and ended up going off and doing that. So that was my education.
A discovery of music at an early age, and obviously playing instruments in your teens. And I want to kind of home in on this, a love and interest in music, and discover where that comes from. You obviously came from a musical background on your mother's side, but was music taught at school? And what music was being played in the household when you were growing up? And what music inspired you to become a musician and actually pursue that career?
Yeah, there was a lot of music in my house. Obviously, my mum was a music teacher. My dad was a vicar, which is absolutely tied in with music. They were both very musical. My sister was musical. My granddad, my dad's dad, actually was he started out doing the piano in the cinemas before there was sound, where they would sit and playing all that. And then he went on to be a pianist in the Northern Club thing, where they would have an in-house organist or keyboard player and a drummer, and then all the singers would come in on tour and he would play for all of them. And he ended up playing for Tony Christie. Well, he played for loads of people actually, but Tony Christie was one that sort of stuck because he was kind of, Road to Amarillo. He had some hits. He was quite a crooner. Years and years and years and years later, I got a call, because I used to play for all sorts of people, to play for Tony Christie when he was doing Top of the Pops, doing the Road to Amarillo. And I was absolutely made up. My granddad had passed away by then, and this is my moment to tell Tony Christie, do you remember Frank Brooks? But I didn't. It didn't happen in the end. Right at the last minute, it didn't happen. To be honest, I think the music bug was as much him, because you kind of idolize your grandparents as much as you do your parents, as it was my mum. But it was a musical, right? There was just music. It wasn't a question. It was just a thing in the house from the get-go.
You kind of, I guess, grow up listening to your parents' music, and then some of us get to a certain age where you almost rebel against that, and you discover things that really turn you on and that you get really into. What was the music that kind of turned you on, and kind of the music you were buying, before you started playing?
I had the weirdest, most uncool taste in music. When I talk to people of my age now about what they were into, they sort of seem to hone their taste on whatever it was they were into, and at quite an early age. And I was just into anything, all sorts, pop. I guess it's just pop, 80s. It was, and there were no. There wasn't one thing that I was into. It was all sorts, a real mishmash of things. you know, you'd buy the singles and the albums, and there was weird things in the house, all sorts of classic. There was lots of classical music in the house, and church music, obviously. So my influences were just really across the board. Later in life, when you know, I was really into Prince and things like that. But early on, it was just everything, you know. And I was pretty obsessed. We had a cellar in the house we were living in, and I would be down there with the guitars and tape machine, you know, just doing whatever I could musically on my own, or bands from quite an early age.
I wanted to come on to instrumentation. You've already said about experimenting and discovery of playing instruments around about during your teens. What specifically attracted you to keyboards and the synthesizer? And can you talk about your early experiments with the instrument and the equipment you were using? And can you talk about some of the other instruments you play, and were you self-taught or did you have music lessons?
So there was a piano in the house, and there was an acoustic guitar, and I dabbled in both. And I didn't really have any lessons until I went to college, when you have to start doing your grades, you know, your associated board, grade 5 and all that sort of stuff. But I kind of fancied myself as a guitarist. Even I did actually do the grades on piano. I don't know why that is, actually. But certainly by the time I moved to London, I guess my main thing was songwriting. I wanted to be a songwriter. That's what I consider myself to be best at, and that's what I thought of myself as. But on an instrument, guitar. And as you said in your intro, there was a group of friends got together to do some gigs. This is in the 90s. And my good friend Paul is an amazing guitarist. I'm not. And I had a keyboard. I did have a keyboard, which I'd got for, you know, writing on. So I just became the keyboard player. I knew, you know, I could find my way around it. And that's how I became a keyboard player. It wasn't an early passion for synthesis. You know, as Gary Numan's keyboard player, I'm often cornered and by people who know far more about it than me, who have been really into synthesis and old gear and new gear and all this sort of stuff from a very early age. And it's embarrassing to admit that I kind of fell into it by accident. I ended up I was a keyboard owner, I would say, rather than a keyboard player. Right up until Gary needed a keyboard player, and then, you know, that was that.
It's interesting that you mentioned you fell into it by accident, and then you also mentioned the 90s decade and forming a band. I wanted to talk about your early musical adventures, and can you share the early bands you were in? What was the music and cultural scene like at that time? And can you discuss your experiences early on the live music scene? So
I moved to London from Yorkshire in 1988 or 9, something like that. So I'd met TJ Davis, who was a singer, a girl singer, at college. We'd both gone to Leeds College. We'd both got this gig, sort of traveling around doing shows and whatnot, and then we decided to move to London to, you know, seek fame and fortune around 89, which was pretty much the summer or the year that the music industry moved to Manchester. Oasis, and, you know, it started moving up there, Happy Mondays and whatnot. So that wasn't a particularly wise move, but we got a band. It changed its name every month, and we just started doing loads and loads of gigs. And it was stuff that we'd written. We tried to meet people in London and do gigs. We must have played every venue that there was. It was horrible. The venues are not, and the scene then, the whole pay to play thing was really tough. but that's what we'd come to do, and we were desperate to move on with it. And we had, various bits of success, signed a few bits and bobs, and never obviously made it. We were playing in all sorts of things, and then TJ. Well, actually, I think the first break was probably the Gary thing. We got management. We had management for the band and for ourselves, and that manager knew Gary. That he was doing something with him, and Gary had mentioned that he was looking for a female singer to go on tour with him, a backing singer, and TJ got the gig. So our project with our career, whatever band it was called at the time, kind of stopped then, because she got this gig, and it was, wow, she got a proper gig, proper job. So she went off and did that. And eventually I met, well, actually through the same manager, I met Nick Van Eed, who was the singer-songwriter in the Cutting Crew, Bananarama. So I did a few gigs with them. That was my first big break, and I'm still very good friends with Nick. So things just went off again accidentally, not at all what we'd planned, but she went that way and I went that way. And that was the end of our terrible band.
We'll come on to the next chapter, and that's the Gary Numan connection. You've been playing in Gary's band now for over 20 years. How did that opportunity happen? And can you recall your first meeting with him and the first gig that you played in his band?
The first time I met him was the manager that we had called me and said, is there any chance you could take this 2-inch tape, the old, before digital, big tape machine that looks like a dishwasher, and it's got the 2-inch tape.
The reel to reel.
Reel to reel. Gary's rehearsing. He lives in this sprawling house up near Stansted Airport, and the master reel to reel of something or other of his, presumably. Actually, that's how the manager knew him. There was some remix that was being done, so that's what it was. Can you take it up to Gary, because they want to listen to it for the rehearsal? Just a delivery job, really. And I got the address and drove up there. And I remember pulling up outside the house, and he came out. I'd never met him. And I guess I was quite young. He's quite intimidating, quite terrifying. He's got these kind of piercing eyes, and he's got this reputation for being difficult, or had, which he's not at all. He's just shy, and I guess he fronts it with a kind of stony face. So he'd got this reputation. So it was quite intimidating, that experience. And the band was rehearsing, TJ was rehearsing, and the whole band were rehearsing there. So that was my first meeting. Then they went off on tour, and with TJ, and I went to see it a couple of times, and there was a few parties, after gig parties and end of tour parties and God knows what, which I went to. So I got to know a few of them, and Gary. And around that time, Gary's brother, John, who'd been in the band playing keys as one of the keyboard players for many years, decided to jack it in. He, like Gary, is a pilot and wanted to become a commercial pilot, which he did. He went off to do that. So they were looking for a keyboard player, and I believe the other keyboard player who was doing it at the time, Aid Orange, said, "What about David? You've met him at parties, and he's all right." And that was it. I can't remember. I think TJ must have told me, or somebody said, "Do you want to go on tour with Gary?" And I went on my birthday, which is in January. I went up to the house. So that would have been 1996, January 1996. Went up to the house to meet him. And when I got there, the band was there with another new guy, Rob Harris, who also didn't know what the hell was going on, like me. And I hadn't been given the job or anything. Gary was talking about the tour that was coming up. And then you just slowly realized that you'd got the job, you know, because he's talking about picking what gear you're going to be wearing, you know, clothes you're going to be wearing, gear, this, that, and the other, timings, rehearsals. And I'm looking at this other guitarist and we're like, okay, that was the easiest audition ever. And that's sort of how Gary operates. If somebody recommends somebody to him, he'll trust their judgment if he trusts their judgment. So he assumes you can do the job. It's about whether he's going to get on with you or whether he likes you, which isn't an exact science, but it works for him, you know, because I've seen it happen since. So that was it. I was in, and you know, have been ever since.
Yeah, and never look back. We fast forward in the timeline from a recommendation, and now you've been in the band 25 plus years. What's it been like playing in Gary's band since 1996? And more importantly, what have you learned from Gary musically about the business side of the industry?
It's been really good. I mean, that's the short answer. I've in that time I've been lucky to do all sorts of things, a lot of which has come off the back of Gary. You know, people call you up sometimes because you're Gary Numan's keyboard player and they want that, you know, so it's opened doors, and I've done other bits and bobs. But when you go on tour with a band, I think Gary's pretty much the only one that it's like a family. You know, you get into your hotel room and there'll already be nowadays a group chat. Right, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're going there. This, you know, other acts and bands and things that I do. You don't. There's not that kind of vibe, that kind of social family thing. That's all right from day one. It's always been a band, you know, as opposed to a group of workers. It also, you know, Gary has had his ups and downs, and he's very much been on the ascent recently for quite a few years. And it is absolutely fascinating to see how many people he's influenced. People come out of the woodwork that you just wouldn't imagine, and genuinely, you know, they were fans. You can tell. They say this. I've got this record. I bought that. We did a session at Maida Vale, the BBC, you know, years ago, and there's this huge old hall with a parquet floor, and we were at one end setting up, and you lay into cars or something, and I just noticed the steady stream of famous faces sticking their head around the door, like, oh my God, it's, you know, absolutely, it's a strange thing. You know you're going to get that if you're working with Cliff Richard or you know, I don't know, Tom Jones or an absolute household name. But Gary's always been over here kind of thing, but he still has that effect on pretty much everybody, which is very cool.
I wanted to pick up on something you've just said, which I find really fascinating and interesting at the same time. I've spoken to a few musicians who have, I guess, been hired hands or session musicians or sidemen for famous performers. And they said the difficulty for that is you're almost trying to slot in with the regular band members, and you're pretty much being dictated by the main creative force in that band, whether it's the lead singer or the songwriter. It's interesting that you mentioned like a sense of being in a band, it almost like a community feel with Gary, and that you're not being controlled by an ego or a creative force. I kind of wanted to pick up on that. It's interesting. Do you kind of feel that as a band you can be, you know, you can collaborate, creative, you know, bring your own creative ideas and say, why don't we try this musically? Is he quite free to other band members' ideas? And
yeah, Yes and no. He has gone through various musical genres and has kind of lost his way and then found his way very definitely in the last, God knows how many years. And he has a very definite idea. And, my musical taste, obviously, everybody's musical taste is different. It's not going to sit completely. So over the years, I've learned what I can suggest and what I can get away with, and what will be received well and what wouldn't, and he is open to suggestion. I think when I first got the gig, I was very wet behind the ears, and he was still transitioning, with things that he was doing. So I would never have dreamt of. I just turned up. The keyboards were there. I didn't bring my own keyboards. You're playing this. This is the part. Play that. Just do that. But interestingly, on that very first tour, from somewhere, this flipping handheld synth appeared, and every keyboard player wants to be a guitar player. Wants to get down there and give it that. So I was playing this thing, and they've never been cool, but it was kind of possibly slightly cooler then in the 90s than it would be now. And I was doing that, and I remember saying to him at one point, having only known him for a couple of weeks, do you mind me poncing about doing this on stage and giving it the big one? I'd hate to feel that I'm, getting in your way or annoying you or looking like I'm trying to upstage you. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, if you upstage me, it's my fault. If anybody upstages me, it's my fault. And nobody ever will, because he's massive, larger than life on stage, and he really goes for it. So you never would. But he that was the end of the conversation. Do what you want. You do your worst. You'll not upstage me. And basically was what he was saying. So that's the freedom you get. Cut to nowadays, 20 odd years later, the people in the band, it's changed a little bit recently, but like the drummer has just left, who's been with him for 29 years. And the guitarist has been with him for 20 odd years as well. So the people in the band are the ones that the chemistry works. So he feels comfortable with them, and they obviously feel comfortable in the band, musically, socially, whatever else. So and there have been other people through. There's been bass players and other odds and sods that have passed through that have not possibly fitted in, or for whatever reason they've gone off doing other things. So we know we've got a good foundation, and people suggest all sorts of things. We did some acoustic things, which is an odd thing for the synthesizer guy, Gary Numan. But there's talk of doing that.
He did some stuff during the lockdown, didn't he? Where he was playing songs sort of unstripped and acoustic. Yeah,
and that's come up in conversation again, and hopefully we'll do that again. There was a few other sort of things that came up. You just sitting on the bus, we should do this or we should do that, or whatever. But yeah, and he's very receptive to it.
I wanted to ask you one final question in regard to your work with Gary Numan's band. Are there any venues or places in the world you most enjoyed playing? Are there any Gary Numan songs you most enjoyed playing live? And which of the studio albums have you most enjoyed playing on, and why?
We've done some massive tours of America, and we did Wembley actually the other day, a few weeks back, which was an absolute bucket list moment, and the Royal Albert Hall with Gary. So they absolutely stand out, just because as a kid you would always want to do that. But some of the places in America, I don't know why, they just seem more exotic and exciting. There's a place called in San Francisco. I've forgotten its name. It'll come to me in a minute. There it is. The Fillmore. I've got. They do you a poster when you play there, and
Yeah, the famous
Right.
Fillmore
Right.
Auditorium. Yeah, many live albums have been cut there over many, many years. Yeah.
yeah. So that you know, that's always exciting to do those kind of places. With the albums, I think you mentioned, I don't play on the albums. Gary does it all, with a guy called Aid Fenton, who's his producer, and between them they just do everything. So I don't play on the albums, just the live stuff. But songs to play, I mean, some of the new stuff on the brand new album is really good fun to play. Particularly, you know, there's been times when it's not been so much fun to play on on past albums, but it's got really very musical, and you do have to, in rehearsal, think, well, I'm going to do that. You know, you have those discussions with the rest of the band. I'll do this and you do that. Oh, that doesn't work, right? We'll do that. You know, so to make things work. Of the old things, I always say there's a song called "Down in the Park," which was I think it was a relatively big hit for Gary. That's always great fun to play because it's, you know, you're all over the shop with it. It's good.
I want to pick up on audiences because I've heard some musicians say that they enjoy performing more in the States because they feel that there's maybe more of an appreciation for the actual musicianship and the musicians themselves, and they kind of feel that there's more of a buzz from an audience in America than there is in the UK. Would you say that, or?
I understand that, and have been aware of that doing other things in other bands. You know, like a London audience can get very sort of blasé, and they've seen everything, and they're very quite hard to impress. Whereas a lot of American audiences and elsewhere in the world, they're a bit more appreciative. But having said that, with this gig with Gary, his British fan base is so what's the word, obsessive, and you know, you've got a generation, if not several generations, of people that have got into keyboard playing and synthesis and synthesizers and certain kinds of music because of him, and they're kind of experts on it. You know, it's really intimidating when you're doing the gig, because you, having done the gig for all these years, I know a lot of them. I've met a lot of them, and I know how good they are at playing the stuff, at dissecting it, you know, and all the rest of it. You know, they know the lyrics better than Gary. They know the keyboard parts better than me. They know what the synth was that played it in the first place, all that sort of stuff. So the waters are a bit muddied on that audience with Gary, because his fans are a bit different, I guess.
From Gary Numan to another musical project that I'm fascinated to hear about and was mentioned in my introduction, and that was working as a musical director on a series of events for Richard Branson, which was staged in over 16 countries. Can you tell us what that project was, when it took place, and what did it entail? And did you have the opportunity to actually meet Branson himself?
So 20 years ago, when I'm not doing touring with Gary, which is pretty much the only artist I do these days regularly, I have a little side hustle, shall we say, that does corporate events. We do award ceremonies. You know, when an organization has an award ceremony, and people come on and we play the music for people to come on to. We've done all sorts of things in London, and so was doing that, and was doing events for Virgin. We did Virgin Mobile, which I don't think even exists anymore. They used to have these massive conferences where you'd go away to where would it be, Hampshire somewhere, to play at this conference for a week. Speakers coming on and off the stage, and award winners and whatnot. And Richard was a lot of these things, and we got asked to play at. So they launch flights to different destinations. I'm trying to think. I think the first one we did ever was Las Vegas in whenever that was, 90 something. They wanted to take a British band to take a bit of culture to a foreign land, and whatever, and then there'd be the local culture there. So we went and did played an event, and it obviously went well. And we've done, I've lost count of how many we've done. We did them in Africa, Nairobi, and our kind of shtick is that we'll go and do something, and there'll be a local band there, or a local entertainment thing, and we'll get together and just cook something up on stage. So that was fascinating. In Africa, we did that. China, which was mad. India, we've been, I mean, everywhere. Caribbean, Barbados, all the launches. In fact, tomorrow, my business is flying to Tampa, because Virgin are launching a flight to Tampa tomorrow. I'm not going to go, and they'll go and they'll perform at the event. And what they do is Richard will go, because he's the face of Virgin Atlantic, and they'll invite all the sort of media, travel agencies. So they usually have a load of celebrities going. I'm trying to think who's gone, but they always have like a plane full of celebrities, just to generate column inches in the press. And then they'll go to the Statue of Liberty or the Eiffel Tower or whatever it is in that city, and take a load of photographs and have a big party. So that's what that is. I'm not going tomorrow, but my company is dealing with it. So it's been great. It's been amazing. And in that time, we played at Richard's house. He used to have a beautiful place in Oxford, country retreat, and he had some sort of works dues, shall we say, where the whole of Virgin were invited to come to this thing, and it was a festival. There were 20,000 people there on one day, in the grounds of his house. So we've played. I've been in the house a few times. There was a time when I knew him reasonably well. I knew his kids, who are grown up and gone now, but they've moved. So yeah, it's been a very good relationship for me. That
from your musical travels and the many air miles, we move on now to some of the high-profile artists and musicians you work with, and some incredible high-caliber names: legend Smokey Robinson, Enrique Iglesias, Bananarama, Ellie Goulding, Nicole Scherzinger. Can you discuss your experiences working with these musicians, and are there any memorable moments you'd like to share?
The Smokey Robinson one was a Virgin event. We were doing Virgin's 25th birthday party, I think it was, which was in New York, and so we'd been asked to go and play there. And Fatboy Slim was the DJ, and the guests were. I'm sitting at the bar talking to this guy, thinking, "It's Kirk Douglas. I can't believe I'm talking to Kirk Douglas," chatting away, and then realizing it wasn't Kirk Douglas. It was Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut.
Yeah,
who looks like Kirk Douglas. Samuel Jackson was a guest there, and liked what we did, so booked us. We played a load of events for him. He has a charity, a men's health charity, and he has events in London, so we did a load of parties for him. He sung, he's got him sung, which was very cool. So at this 25th birthday party for Virgin, we got word that Smokey Robinson was going to be there, and he likes to get up and sing. So just have that in your back pocket kind of thing. So we got together and rehearsed, and we rehearsed a load of his songs, and we rehearsed them in several keys because he's older now, you know, and we'd heard that he can't get up there, which may or may not be true. But we learned a load of his songs in loads of keys. And we flew out there and we were doing our thing, and sure enough, he appeared, and he's a really striking bloke.
He's got those striking eyes, hasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
The green eyes, aren't they?
Just so piercing. And he's down there and he's singing along, and oh bloody hell, it's really going to happen. So he got up on stage, and he just said, "I'll do anything." And we were saying, I was trying to sort of communicate to him that we've learned whatever you want, you know, to tell us one of your songs and tell us what key, we'll do it in whatever key. No, we'll just do whatever. And we ended up doing Superstition, you know, Stevie Wonder, and then he was gone. He nailed it, and the place went mad, and that was that. It was one of those moments. But there was a few of those there. There was some of the Motown writers were at that party and got up and played with us as well. So that was Ashford and Simpson. So anyway, mad.
Yeah, and some of the other artists that I mentioned as well, Bananarama was mentioned, Nicole, Scherzinger. Can you share some of those moments working with them? And
yeah, that was good. I got that through a mate who I work with quite a lot. He was doing them, and I don't know what happened to the keyboard player. So I did that for quite a while, and there was a point when I was like doing a Gary festival one weekend, or even sometimes on the Friday or whatever, and then a Bananarama festival the next day, or certainly the next weekend, and it was just falling at the same time, and it was brilliant because they couldn't be more different bunch of people, different audience. The Bananarama thing is, you know, the retro festivals and the sort of happy fun and games.
I can imagine that's good fun, and the girls I always think come across as just fun, nice, and down-to-earth personalities.
Yeah, they're great. There was, when I did it, and again now, there's just the two, Karen and Sarah. There was a short period after I finished that Siobhan came back. So it was just the two of them, but they were great. Yeah, lovely. We went off all over the place doing gigs, and it was very different from the Gary thing. You know, in musically and just the events were just different. But that's great. I absolutely loved it. The fact that it was so different. Nicole Scherzinger, I can't remember how I got that, but I put a band together to do a few bits and bobs with her. And we did a few shows. There's a really cool one on YouTube where she's singing Purple Rain with us, like an acoustic thing, because she's really good. You know, you don't realize just how good she is. And she turns up on her own, you know, no chauffeur, no entourage, just turns up, rehearses the song, and puts a frock on, and off you go. She was great fun.
So far, throughout the course of the interview, we've spoken about the bands you've been in, collaborations, Gary Numan. We mentioned a whole host of names. I want to now come on to your solo endeavors, and what made you decide to embark on writing, composing, and producing your own solo album?
So I, from the very earliest days as a kid, had written songs and sort of fancied myself as a songwriter, and had always wanted to be a songwriter. Never really had, never made it by any stretch of the imagination. And then, you know, you get taken off in different directions doing other things, Gary thing, and keyboard things. In fact, some of my mates that I've gone through music with laugh, because for me to be going off as a playing musician rather than the songwriter, and other people have gone other ways. You know, brilliant, amazing keyboard player has got a job writing jingles or whatever. That's how music works. So I got taken away from it, had kids. So, you know, that had long gone. But then the bass player in Gary's band, Tim Muddyman, had done a sort of crowd-funded album, you know, where you do an online media campaign, and you tell everybody that you're going to do this, and everybody can buy it in advance, and it kind of pays for the thing to be done. And he'd done really well out of it. The Gary fans had absolutely taken him on, and he kept saying, you've really got to do this. I think he knew that I had written and had probably played him stuff. He was really encouraging and really good at telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing. So that went on for ages. And then eventually, you know, a couple of years ago, I kind of went for it. And it all started on the tour bus, literally on the tour bus, just kind of jotting things down. And then lockdown hit. So I sat here and did it. And it was a brilliant experience to you know, put so much into something and polish it to the most intricate degree, and then put it out. And I will do it again. I would do it again, and I will do it again. Somebody asked me the other day how I felt about it, and the weird thing is that you know, I wasn't expecting it to be number one, and I wasn't expecting to be you know, touring stadiums or anything. I knew that wasn't going to happen, and I didn't expect that at all. But it came. It burnt quite brightly. We did some gigs, and people bought it, and it was wonderful. And then it stopped, and you think, well, hang on, that was my everything. That was my life's work. That was the best I could do. And it's gone. It stopped. It's finished, and nothing's changed. It kind of paid for itself. So it's not like I've got a Lambo on the drive or anything. You know, not that I expected that to happen at all. But in your mind, you just kind of think, this is brilliant. I'm so proud of this, and it comes and goes. Do you know what I mean? So it was a strangely disappointing experience.
Talking about being proud of the album, I wanted to ask you where the name Little Finger, where that comes from, and can you describe the sound, the feel, the mood of the Big Finish album? How long did it take to complete, and can you talk about some of the contributors on the project? I
wanted to call it a band. I didn't really want to do David Brooks, and I certainly didn't want to you know, have me on the album cover doing that kind of thing, because I just didn't want to do that. And I was kind of thinking, when I first came up with it, a sort of Basement Jaxx or Daft Punk thing, so call it a band name rather than a personal name. And it just came to me. I think it was those sort of old bands like Little Feat, Badfinger. I think that was it. But the weird thing was that I went to a Marilyn Manson gig. A friend got us in around that time, and he was saying something on stage. I wasn't even really listening to what he was saying, but he suddenly said in the middle of what he was saying, Little Finger, and I thought, that's it. I'm going to have that. That's what we'll have. I'd never seen Game of Thrones, and I'd never heard of it, and it was really annoying when I found out there was a character in Game of Thrones called Littlefinger, because it was nothing to do with that. But so that was that. The original idea was it was going to be, as I say, a sort of Chemical Brothers, Basement Jaxx kind of thing, where I'd get people to do things, and singers that I know, TJ and my wife, who's a singer. And it sort of was that, I guess. It sort of was that. It's a little bit more songy than those acts that I mentioned. One little story that I've told before was that I was trying to keep it fairly electronica-y and stick with a brief so that there was a bit of a theme, which I failed horrendously. But in the 90s, I was really, really into this band called Freak Power, and their lead singer, Ashley Slater, who I think has just got the most amazing voice. If I could have anybody's voice, it would be his. And I had a bit of an in with him because my wife is a singer, and one of her singer friends used to sing in Freak Power, and we'd once gone to a party and he was there and I'd met him. So that was that. My wife is Facebook friends with him, and he'd come to some trampolining thing in the town where I live with his son. I'm sitting here doing some sad song, you know, and he messaged and said, do you live in, to her, out completely out the blue, do you live in Heathfield? Because we're coming to Heathfield. And she said, yeah, do you come around for a cup of tea? And she came in and said, Ashley Slater's coming around for a cup of tea. And I've said before, it's like, you know, Dave Garn's coming around for a cup of tea, or Elvis Presley or whatever. And I freaked out. And then he came in, and he was just a dad with his kid, visiting some parents with their kids. And we sat and talked about trampolining and, you know, schools and stuff. And we got some fish and chips, and their kids played upstairs and that sort of thing. And I'm sat here, and there's a Freak Power ticket on that notice board there. And I was sorting out the corner of my eye, and I thought, please don't see it, because I'm going to look like a geek. And I had this song that I'd written years and years ago that I was just completely ripping off Freak Power. Every trick and every defining feature of a Freak Power song, I'd nicked it and put it in this song. And I suddenly thought, if he goes and I never see him ever again, I'm going to hate myself if I don't ask him if he'd sing it. So I asked him, and he said yes. And I played it to him, and I sat here, he sat there. And as I'm playing it, I could hear all the songs, all the Freak Power songs, and it was cringingly awful because it was so plagiarized. It was disgusting. And he didn't flinch. He said, yeah, I'll sing it. And it didn't fit in on the album at all, but I couldn't not. So that's on there. And he's never said, come on, mate, that's all of that, that's Freak Power, that's my song. How about some points? So that was good.
That's a really nice story, and a chance meeting as well with an idol.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what's the reaction been like to the Big Finish album, and how have you gone about releasing and promoting it? And do you intend to perform the album live? And do you have plans? I know you've suggested already to do a follow-up.
If I'm honest, the Numan fans bought the album. My mates from school, my family, but 95% of the sales were Gary's fans. Gary posted it all over the internet and endorsed it in the most generous way, and I plundered that, and they were so brilliant. How whether they were into it or not, I don't know, but they bought it, and I'm eternally grateful. And we did some gigs, unfortunately, right on the end of lockdown, so it was a bit strained. We did one up north and one in London, and I had a good turnout, but it wasn't an amazing turnout because it had been lockdown. And then since then we've been touring with Gary, so we've not been able to get it together. The promotion, to be honest, was pretty much just that. I'm terrible with the whole online thing, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you, Twitter, awful. So I didn't do it very well at all, and I'm sure it could have been done a whole lot better. I really, really desperately want to do some more gigs. I keep getting the odd little messenger thing from Gary's fans, because Gary's not gigging at the moment, saying, you know, you're going to do it again, do some more. So I just need to get my finger out and work out how to go about it. I'd love to do a little tour up and down the country. So that's on the cards. The album, every now and again, I get an email every day, actually, from the people that distribute it. And it sort of trickles out still, which is cool. It was tough. It was hard. It was stressful. There was all sorts of unforeseen things that you don't realize that made it stressful. And I had no appetite for doing another one. But my wife's away at the moment. She's a singer and she's on tour, and I'm looking after the kids. But when they go to bed, I've been doodling, and I've been thinking, yeah, maybe I could do it again. Maybe I could do another one, you know, and write all the mistakes that I made on the first one. So the idea has only cropped up in the last few days.
David, we shortly come on to that moment, and that's the moment where we ask all your take guests these quick fire 13 questions to wrap up the interview and find out things maybe outside of music that we weren't aware of, and just to find out a bit more about you, but slightly a little bit off track from your musical endeavors and your career. Outside of music, what are your interests and hobbies? And can you tell us about your wife's musical endeavors? Because you've spoken briefly about her, and your children. Are they interested in music and performing? And do you have any future musical plans and any desire to work creatively outside of music?
I don't have a lot of interests outside of music. I've got to be honest. I used to be really into sport, but sport and music, you know, rugby was my thing, and it doesn't really go well with being a keyboard player. So that's kind of slipped away, and I've got kids now, so you know, it's not, obviously that's not a hobby, but it's certainly takes you time. So I should have a hobby. I should find something to do outside of music, because I think that would be healthy. My wife it does the same as me, really. She's a singer, and she used to do lots of touring, loads of touring, Rob Williams and Stereo MCs and The Cure, and you know, loads of big names, far more than me. But she kind of knocked it on the head for the kids, you know, and devoted herself to that. But in the last couple of years, she got well, she's been doing it for quite a while on and off, but she's on tour at the moment with Will Young. Will Young's doing a UK tour, and she's away with him. So it's unusual for her to be away. So yeah, it's me and the kids, which I'm not sure how they're finding that.
How old are your kids now, and are they musical? Are they interested in doing similar to you and your wife?
Yeah, I've got twins, boy and a girl, who are just 14 the other day, and they're musical. The boy is always in here, come in to do something, and he'll be sat here doing, you know, working on my equipment. So he's really into his music, and my 17-year-old is at music college, BIM, Brighton Institute of Music, and she's actually out now on a writing session with quite a well-known, well, I could say well-known. He used to do Sugar Babes, write Sugar Babes tracks, and that's what I know about him. That's how I know it. I know him. So she's getting all these writing sessions, and I'm thinking, when I was 17, if I could have got, you know, some of the things that she's managed to do, which is absolutely more power to her. So yeah, she's definitely going that way.
It was interesting earlier on, you say that music can take you in different paths, different directions, and you mentioned that, you know, you could have been doing composition for radio, for jingles, for composition for maybe film and TV. Have you ever thought about venturing maybe into those areas?
I used to do jingles and adverts with a partner, a writing partner. We did that for quite a while. He's very good at that and still does it. And I kind of drifted out of it for one. It's a strange pressure and a strange confinement with things like that. And I didn't handle it very well. Like I'm producing some tracks for a guy at the moment, and he quite rightly, he's in Italy, he's Italian, texting saying, "Where's the track? You know, where's this? Where's that? Where did?" And it really stresses me out. I'm not good with that, weirdly. So the jingly thing slipped away. I would love to do film music. I did a little independent thing once for a friend, and I absolutely loved it. And the thought of doing a proper big thing and going that way, I would love that. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
David Brooks, we come to that moment. We ask every single Your Take guest. There's been about 90 of them so far.
Wow.
We ask them these same quick fire questions. Don't need to think about these in any depth, but here we go. There's 13 in total. Number one is, what is your favorite pastime?
Well, if it's not, being on stage, it's being with my kids.
Nice answer. We just mentioned the medium of film. You said maybe a love to go into film composition, but if you had to choose a favorite film, what would it be and why?
Heaven Can Wait, an old film called Heaven Can Wait. Oh God, what's his name? Warren Beatty.
Yeah, Warren Beatty. Yeah,
there was an awful remake of it, which was appalling. But the original Warren Beatty, Julie Christie, gets me every time. I've sat my kids down in front of it, saying this is going to knock you, socks off, and they didn't get it at all. Which was, but I love it. I've seen it 1,000 times.
I've never seen it, but I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm a huge film buff, but I respect Warren Beatty, but I don't feel I've seen enough of his films. And he's quite a prolific director as well, isn't he?
Right,
as well as being a huge star. So I'm going to watch that film. It's on my list.
It's a soppy love story, but it's an interesting one, and he just plays it just right. It's good.
And he was quite a good-looking guy back in the day. From cinema now to books, but who would you choose as your favorite novelist?
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not a big reader. I wish I was. I wish I could say that I was, because I feel as if I should be, and I respect people that are. My wife reads all the time, but I don't read a lot of books. I read, online stuff. I do read. I'm not sort of scrolling through TikTok or whatever. I read things, and I read a few biographies, I guess, but I have to sidestep that question because I haven't got an answer.
I feel the same as you. I'm more of a film man. I feel bad because I buy books wanting to read them, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and just never feel like I've got the time to devote.
Yeah.
I just always feel I've got other things which I feel really bad about because I'd like to. But yeah, life goes on, I guess. If you could have chosen a different profession outside of music, what would it have been?
Well, I was gonna go be a teacher when I was going through my education. I think the plan was English teacher. That was my thing. Looking back now, if I could, I tell you what, I'd love to have gone into journalism or television journalism. I watch Sky News. I'm obsessed with Sky News. Watch it all the time. I'd love to have been either the anchorman or the, I don't know, the flipping LA correspondence or whatever, or a presenter on a TV show. That would have, I don't know why. I just love it.
I think I would have picked the same profession as you, but musician as well, I would have loved to have done. But I get this fascination for journalism. Yeah, I think kind of questionings. I love watching things like Newsnight. I love the journalist questioning someone, and you can find out so much information from just good questions and good rapport with the guest.
Yeah, I listen to LBC a lot, and I constantly wondering if I could do that. You know, just genuinely think, Matey Boy in the Morning, who's so on it.
Is that James O'Brien?
James O'Brien. I'm listening to him, love him and hate him, and he's so on it and so knowledgeable. And I would love to know if I could even get out of the starting blocks with something like that. That would be amazing, a job like that. If you
going off course a little bit, but I love Andrew Marr as well, because I feel he's a bit of he's a wordsmith as well. He's written books on history of Britain and politics, and I just love the fact that he plays on words, and I just find him so fascinating to listen to. Yeah,
I love him. Love that channel.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Who would you cite as your greatest inspiration in life?
God, yeah, that's a good one. Greatest inspiration. Well, my dad. Sorry, it's such a cheap one, this, but my dad passed away about a month ago, and he'd been very ill for a very long time, and we knew he was going, and I had been daring myself to read the eulogy, you know, write something and get up and speak, which you think, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And everybody was saying, I don't know if you're going to be able to do it, but I did it. And in doing it, you realize, I wrote what I thought about my dad and said all the stuff, and you realize, yeah, he smashed it. You know, he had a great life. He did a good thing, and I think if it's not too twee, I'd say my dad.
Yeah, a nice answer. Do you think about him a lot? Is he still like a huge influence on the decisions you make in your life, the way you raise your family?
Very much.
Yeah,
very much. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm more of one of these parents that has my dad's values, rather than the one of those that's gone the other way, you know, because my dad was like this, I'm like that kind of thing, which I'm aware of people like that. But he had an absolute sense of right and wrong, and there was no grey area, and it never faltered, and you know, on this day or that day it was. And so I try to, and he was just a really honest, likable person, you know. Yeah, that's I would sort of definitely say him.
Something I didn't pick up on in our conversation, but you mentioned he was a priest and a religious man. Did you grow up being a believer, or were you agnostic, or did you kind of follow in his footsteps with his principles and his religious beliefs?
I was brought up in the church, obviously his church, and we always went to church, and I have continued to go to church in adult life, not nearly regularly enough. I'm a terrible Christian. I would say I'm a Christian, but I'm, in terms of time in church, I probably wouldn't score very highly, but my values and my thinking are on the money. And my wife's Christian. She was brought up in the church as well. My sister, who is a solicitor, has just is sort of pursuing a career in the church as well now. So that's interesting. I mean, I've never really considered it for me. I don't think they'd have me, to be honest. No, but yeah, I'm a Christian.
An avid listener to LBC, and you spoke about in another lifetime you would have loved to have been a journalist. Comes on timely to the next question. Do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
I don't read a newspaper. I'm obsessed with my Sky News app, and I even catch myself sitting in there watching Sky News, reading Sky News on the app at the same time. I don't know why.
What's the name? Kay Burley, isn't it? Is
Well,
the main?
it could be that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I just want to be informed, I guess. But I don't read a newspaper. So I guess Sky News is my equivalent.
From news now to food, are you a cook? And if so, what's your favorite food?
I'm not a cook. I have very, very occasionally made something and got great pleasure out of people commenting on it and enjoying it and all that. But my wife is an amazing cook. And I think she enjoys it. She seems to enjoy it. She does the cooking most of the time. And my son is, well, actually, they're all good. They're all good. My oldest daughter, but my son cooked tonight, made us a really nice meal. We're all trying to muck in while Angie's away. So we're sort of taking it in turns, but I'm terrible at getting on with it, you know. So can't claim that one.
Do you have a favorite dish or particular style of? Yeah.
I love Indian food. I love traveling, and I love just trying the weird and wonderful. I'm a vegetarian, but you can still, you know, there's still all sorts of fantastic things you can eat virtually everywhere. We've got family in Spain, and we spend a lot of time there, and that's about the only place in the world where you can't be a vegetarian, but everywhere else is good.
We go on next to, this is a tricky one. It stumbles a lot of our guests. We get them to choose favorite cultural icon. It could maybe be a figure from political history, an inventor, maybe somebody in music, someone who's changed the course of history. Who would you choose?
Off the top of my head, and I'm sorry if it's a cheap trick, but probably would say Nelson Mandela. I when I was a kid, I wasn't a teacher's pet kind of kid. I was probably in trouble more than not, but I did an assembly on Nelson Mandela. Got up in front of the whole school and did this assembly, and he was in prison at the time. You know, I was sort of campaigning for his release. How that came about, I don't know. And then years later, there was when he was out, there was a big gig in Hyde Park.
Yeah, the big concert, and Dire Straits and Clapton, and
Amy Winehouse and all the rest of it. And he was there on the stage, and then we became aware that he was leaving. And I legged it and sort of fought my way through the crowd. I mean, I'd seen him from 100 yards away, but I didn't get that close. But it was off stage, getting into his car. I just sort of saw him, and I was really pleased that I just laid eyes on him, because I think he's a piece of history, and what an incredible man, you know, incredible story. So yeah, Nelson Mandela.
It is an incredible story, and a really interesting choice. We go from cultural icons now to favorite curse words. What's your favorite curse word and why?
Oh dear, I don't know. I'm pretty fluent in all of them, to be honest. It's funny because I'm sort of teaching my kids about curse words. I feel as if I did quite a good job on Lola, the oldest one, and now the younger two, saying, you know, we all know the words, and we all know you know the words to the twins. But it's about when you use them and where you use them, and it says more about you. And obviously you don't use them in class, you don't use them in front of your friends, mates. There's a time and a place, and you've got to work out when and where, and that's the trick. That's the clever thing. I'm not, you know, I've got no problem with you swearing with your mates and whatnot, but I don't want to hear it. So sorry, that's a really rubbish answer because it doesn't answer your question. But it's funny because we've just been on this now. I sort of no swearing.
What is your kind of go-to curse word?
You name it. Well, when they're not around, anything. There is no limit to.
No stopping you.
Yeah, in the right company.
Travel's come up a lot. in the conversation today, but what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
Well, as I say, we spend a lot of time in Spain, southern Spanish countryside with Angela's family. I love it there. And we both, travel, but you often are there for a day, wherever you are. And I'd love to go back to a lot of these places, Italy and bits of America with my wife. Went to Thailand once very briefly. I'd love to do that all again, and see some of these. If I had a load of money, I would spend it on travel, not on sports cars.
Yeah.
I would love to just see the stuff out of James Bond films rather than the cars.
Okay, we move on now to favorite music artist. Who would you choose? And what is your all-time favorite album?
I was terrible at sticking to a thing, but Prince is the boy, isn't he? For me, is he had it all for me, and Purple Rain probably is my favorite Prince album. Over the years, I've loved. Did you just say favorite album?
Yeah, favorite album. Yeah.
Introducing the Hard Line by Terence D'Arby is an incredible album, I think, for me. And what else do I like? Just trying to think. I've got strange taste. Aerosmith, pretty much anything they've done. I love all of that.
Did you ever see Prince live?
I did. I saw him twice. I saw him twice. I saw him way back at Wembley, which he was amazing. Wembley's hard work when you're in the middle of the pitch, surrounded by people. And then we went to see that 30 Nights or whatever it was he did at the O2.
Yeah.
Which just was mind-boggling.
I saw him just before he died. I saw him at what was the Birmingham LG Arena.
Right.
And I feel bad to say this because I always admired him and I had the albums, but I wouldn't class myself as like a massive diehard fan like yourself. But of all the big artists I've seen, I feel like I've been fortunate enough to see Springsteen, McCartney, and some of those the Stones. But for me, he was the best by a country mile.
Oh, wow.
He was just unbelievable. And
Right.
There was a moment at the gig where he finished his set. I remember it was an all-female backing band. And there was just this ovation for about 5 minutes, people saying, come back, more. And nothing happened. And most of the audience had gone. They just disappeared. So half the capacity had gone home. And I thought he's going to come back out. And he did. He just did a solo set on his own, told everybody to come up to the front and just did another gig. It was incredible.
Blimey.
Yeah, I was just blown away.
That's a treat, isn't it? To something like that to happen. And be able to.
Musician-wise, playing guitar, bass, piano, you could just do it all.
Yeah. That's in this world of where everything is synthesized and polished. You can make anybody a pop star, I believe, and if you know the right people, and it can be done. So for some genuine talent, Paul McCartney is another one. He's a god, I would say. So I appreciate people like that, Stevie Wonder, real genuine, what do you call him, virtuosic. I'll tell you who's a sort of unsung one of those is Nick Kershaw. You never hear that said, but I when I was doing Bananarama, we would do these things, and there'd be all the 80s bands on, like Go West, Nick Kershaw, Spandau and whatnot. And I was watching him, and he wrote all those songs. And although that you don't know, well, you do, everybody knows he wrote Chesney Hawkes and da-di-da-di-da. But he plays it all, and keyboards. He is another sort of Prince type thing, but you know, I don't. He's very shy. He didn't really cultivate that kind of superstar thing like Prince did.
The final two questions, but before I ask them, Terence Trent D'Arby's an interesting one, and I'd love to interview him because I want to kind of find out what happened to him, because he was such a big name, wasn't he, at one stage, and almost like he just disappeared. I don't know if he's still performing, or kind of quite sad.
I thought he was the savior in the 80s. I thought this is it. It's amazing. And as you say, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. And then I realized quite recently that he changed his name to Sananda Mantrea, and he lives in Italy. He's married to an Italian woman, and they've got kids. He lives over there, releases stuff under that name on his own, no record company or anything. I think he upset too many people. I maybe he only had one album, I don't know, but I think he upset too many people. You know, that he was a massive star, and he was quite a big personality, and I bet he was quite difficult to be around. I've seen a few bits of footage from the time. There was a brilliant documentary at the time about the album and the tour, and he was a bit of a handful. And I think he probably just ruffled a few feathers, and that was it. He, you know, I know that quite recently, Martin Ware, who produced Introducing the Hard Lime, lives in Venice, and was putting a festival together in Italy, and had got James Brown's band to play, and obviously knows Terence Trent D'Arby, who's now called Sananda Mantrea, and asked him to join the band, to be the singer. I mean, genius. It's brilliant. Who wouldn't want to see that? And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He didn't want to be. I heard him saying in an interview something about the band. I wouldn't want to. He's just a strange attitude. So I think he stacked it. You know, just.
I'm going to go away and do some research. The last two questions, David. First one, what is your greatest achievement to date?
Oh, blimey. Crikey. Well, marrying my wife, obviously. I'm very proud of that. I've done very well there. On a joking level, Gary, many years ago, rang me up and said, "You know any guitarists?" Because his guitar player left. And I thought about it, and I knew lots of guitarists, and put this guy, Steve Harris, in, and a more perfect marriage musically of minds and stuff has never, not since Keith and Mick, you know. I've jokingly on the bus when we're traveling, it has been said, and I've said, that was me, I did that. And I actually do think, you know what, I got that right. I definitely got that right. And yeah, I'm quite proud of that.
And then last question, David Brooks, how do you wish to be remembered?
Like my dad. No, you know, a full life, honest person, and that genuinely was nobody with a wrong word about my dad by the time he gone, not in his family, not in, you know, all the way through his life. What an achievement. I've already messed that one up, but maybe when I go, that people will have forgotten and they'll remember me in that way.
the final chapter of the interview, but obviously not the final chapter of your musical career and what might come. Hopefully, I wish you all the very best if there is a follow-up album,
Thank you.
solo album. Also, maybe the opportunity of going into film or TV composition. I hope that does come true. I watched a few interviews of yourself leading up to this interview, and you just always come across as a nice, like you said, genuine, humble guy, and you have done this evening. And I thank you very kindly for your time and sharing your incredible story and all the people you've kind of hung about with, met socially, performed with. It's been quite an incredible host of names.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope I haven't rambled on too much, but thanks for having me.
No, thanks a lot. I'm going to ramble slightly and close out. I'm going to ask you in a minute where we can buy the album and find out more. But I have a bit of a Gary Numan story to bore you. It's not particularly that interesting. It's a little bit bizarre. It's about 5 years ago. I was on a family holiday and my mum was reading Hello magazine. And there was a spread in there of Gary Numan with his wife. I think, do they live in LA or?
Yep.
And she said, you like Gary Numan, you've got a couple of his albums. There's a spread with him, article with pictures of him and his wife. Have a look. I was like, okay, yeah, I've got a few albums. I've got a few greatest hits. I do like him. And then a week later, I was at work. I was a manager at a cinema at the time. And I was relieving one of the staff members who was on like the ticket box office. And this blonde woman comes in and says, any chance we can just come in and use the toilet facilities? I went, yeah, help yourself, no problem. I thought, that's weird. I've seen this woman somewhere and I cannot work out where. And then stood down by the end of the box office, chatting with some guy, it might have even been you, was Gary Numan. I'm like, oh yeah, that was his wife who was in the magazine article.
Right, yeah.
He was chatting to this guy, and all I wanted to do was grab a bit of teal roll and say, can I have your autograph? And I never did it. And not that I'm shy coming forward, but it was just bizarre. 1 week on holiday with a magazine in front of me, looking at glossy photographs of how the other half live. And then they happened to be right in front of my face. Obviously,
was that in Bristol?
I was in Bristol, so I presume you must have been playing the Academy in Bristol.
I bet so, yeah. Yeah,
so it was just bizarre.
It's when we do a tour, UK tour, we always do Bristol Academy. So I would imagine that's why they would have been there. And it could have been me.
And lastly, how do we find out more or see you on the road? Any tours coming up with Gary Numan or anyone else? How do we buy the album and your website as well?
There's a website, littlefinger.club. Where you can buy the album, and there's a bit of info, and there'll be tour dates if I ever get it together. Or just find me on Facebook or Instagram. Or I do sort of dabble on those, but I'm on there as David Brooks and Littlefinger actually. So yeah, you can find me there. But if you go to littlefinger.club, you can buy the album, which would be very nice.
Yeah, I definitely want to have a listen. I'll be getting a copy. And lastly, a random question. Did the band ever do She's Got Claws? Because I always had a soft spot for that one. Gary Numan number.
Yeah, it's funny, because I have often thought we have now done every single song, because we've done so many, and we've done tours where we've done classic albums, and we've done, every now and again, he'll pull out an obscure tune just to vary the set. And I keep thinking, we've done them all. And then somebody said something the other day, and I thought, no, never played that. And I don't think we've ever played that. She's Got Claws. I don't think so.
It's a good one and a good video. Sort of got a film noir, him with a jacket and
the hat, the
trilby. Yeah, it's an interesting, yeah.
All right. Yeah. I'll tell him. I'll suggest it for next time we go out.
Yeah, do it. Thanks a lot again. And yeah, as I said, wish you all the best. And thanks for joining me tonight on Your Take.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.